Hello, I'm Jason Ball, and this is Life After News. I love so many things about doing this podcast. One of them is, of course, reconnecting with old friends and colleagues. But the other thing is meeting new people and making new friends. And that's what we're doing today. I recently spoke with Tom Sietsema, who just retired from the Washington Post as their food critic. And we talk about some of the unique challenges of being a food critic, like maintaining your anonymity, most importantly. And we talk about his next chapter in his life after news. And he also tells me what the key to a good lamb burger is. Tom Sietsema, thank you so much for joining us. You recently left the Washington Post as the food critic for almost 26 years. Congratulations on a great run.
Thank you. It feels liberating, frankly.
I'm sure it does. I left my news career 4 years ago, and it was definitely liberating. So you decided to take the buyout, this round of buyouts, and I understand that a couple of years ago, the Washington Post had another round of buyouts, but you chose not to. Why did you decide now?
Now, well, last year I hadn't quite hit the 25 year mark. And I've always liked those anniversary numbers. 25 feels good and solid and a good parting point, I guess. Also, 2 years ago, the buyouts were much more generous. And this time they were okay. But, buyouts never get better going down the road, right? So I just thought, hey, I'm 64. I'm going to be 65 next year. I've done pretty much everything I wanted to do at the Washington Post in 26 years. And I thought, take this money and use it as seed money for what you might really want to do.
And what is that?
Well, among other things, I want to travel more. I want to cook more. I just sort of want to get off this hamster wheel. At one point, I was writing numerous columns, a review a week, 2 dining guides a week, critics' notebooks. And my big blunder was very early on in 2000. I was following the legendary Phyllis Richmond, who had been in the job almost 24 years. And I thought I had to unleash every idea that I had, to be worthy of this job. And I did. And so I just feel like I've been kind of running on fumes more or less the last year or so. It was in some years my best year, but also my hardest year in that, this stuff never gets easier, right? And I just feel like I wanted more time to work out and be a productive citizen and read more than just what I had to read for my job and be home a little bit more often too. I was out lunches and dinners and, get out the world's smallest violin. It is not like going to a factory and punching in and out, 9 to 5 every day. But I just had other things that I wanted to do. And I went on this sort of listening tour before I made this decision and went out with a bunch of really smart people. The former publisher of the Post. I went out with Kara Swisher. I went with people in TV and other, media empires and asked them, casually, like, what would you do? And most of them said, go, go, go. The state of our business, whether it's radio, TV, or newspaper, is just so different from what was when I started, and certainly when you started, right? And I just feel like, if you ever want to make that leap, you got to do it now. And also down the road, like the last few months after the buyout was announced, all these stars started aligning. I went overseas to Copenhagen to a food symposium where people from all over the world came to speak. It was sort of like, TED Talk with food, right? And one of the speakers was Jose Andres, the world famous chef and humanitarian. And at one point in his one-on-one with another chef, he said, you've really got to dream out loud and be responsible for those ideas or fantasies you have. And I've long wanted to sort of be my own boss in a way and sort of chart my own course. It's very comfortable, as we know, when you're behind a big brand. I haven't, I've had a boss, since the 1980s, but I think you need to do those things that scare you sometimes. And I felt like I had created a community among readers of the Washington Post that I wanted to continue to hang out with, but just do it on my own terms in my own way.
And I think also your anonymity was very important to you for 20, 25, all these years. And I'm
It
sure
was.
after a while, being as well known as you are in the DC area, that had to be difficult too.
Well, it was. It was funny because you'd go to extraordinary lengths to sort of not be photographed or not, bring attention to yourself. So, I did turn down a lot of opportunities to do things that other journalists might have been able to do if they were just to show their face. But if you're going to be invited onto a TV show or Food Network or any of those things, you can't be pixelated for a full half hour or hour, right? I mean, it just doesn't work. You'd be taking attention away from the contestants or the other panelists or the other people on the show, whatever it is. And I'm glad I did it for as long as I did, and I really protected that up until the end. But I do feel unleashed now in a way that feels really, really good. And I'm meeting the men and women who have cooked for me and for DC for so long and for so well, and that has been a lot of fun. I feel like I'm starting a whole new life, really, in some ways.
That, that's pretty amazing. I met Bill Addison, the LA Times food critic, a few
Great
years
guy,
ago. He was
good friend.
Yeah, he was on a podcast that I did prior, and after I did that, like a year later, a PR person emailed me like 3 pictures and like, "Is one of these Bill Addison?" I'm like, "I am not getting in the middle middle of that."
Good for you. A
I'm like,
journalist there. We appreciate it, right?
right, but it does have to be hard and challenge, and then especially what are you eating out 5, 10 times a week?
10 meals a week on
Wow.
average. Yeah.
So, and you wrote over 1,200 reviews. I mean, that's almost like one a week.
Yeah, and it was probably more than that because I was doing more than just reviews too. I was doing stories and critics notebooks and things like that too. So that is just and I was hosting a weekly online discussion too it was online, it wasn't podcast or anything like that. But people from all over the world would weigh in on where to eat in Paris or the proper way to eat sushi, or they would ask me to help solve their restaurant dilemmas, whatever it was. And I really felt like that hour was probably the most important hour of my work week because I got a sense of what people were thinking about in terms of food, um, taking the temperature, right? From all over. We got a lot of people, a lot of listeners from the West Coast, a lot of people in the Midwest, people in Europe, all over. It was really interesting. They were all post subscribers for the most part. And I feel like in that hour, I was able to create this community that appreciated someone who took the time to be civil, answer their questions. I tried to avoid politics and things like that. Um, but I tried to make it a meaningful, impactful hour too. It wasn't just like go here, go there. I had some really touching things come my way too. A woman who had just lost her husband and she was lonely, or a group of solo people who wanted to meet other people. They did that through, a food lens and meeting people in restaurants and everything. So I wanted to take that idea and carry it over into another venue.
Now, I was gonna say, is that what you're thinking of developing for your next phase? And kind of, it seems like that's what you're passionate about.
Well, the thing is, you never know what's going to happen. Like these jobs don't open up. I knew there'd be some interest in this, right? But like I got 800 comments on my story. I think I've done 25, 26 interviews. Um, and, it's just an unusual job. I get it. It has been occupied by one person for probably too long. And so there's interest in this, right? And people are interested in food. I think everything can be a food story, for instance. I want to carry this audience over into something else. And I think that what I'd like to do is do a newsletter, uh, down the road, something that's a little different from what other people are doing. I want to start that in the new year because I really do need a breather right now. But just sort of tied over from now to starting my newsletter, what I want to do is bring people together in my home and cook for them. A small group of people once or twice a month. I'm calling it Lamb Burger Night so that people come over for lamb burgers. Lamb burgers are sexier than hamburgers. They show some thought, though. A 3-course meal. We have some drinks, open a bottle of wine, and I want the guests around this table to be from different walks of life, right? I had my inaugural dinner last night, and that was fun. We had a couple of journalists. We had a chef. Um, we had a former Marine, right? there are 2 hosts and then 4 guests. And my next dinner, I've already got an Uber driver who lived in Afghanistan coming over. I've got the head of the Smithsonian Institute's History Museum. I've got someone from radio and a restaurant pro. I just want different people, people who don't look like me. Let's put it that way.
That's amazing. I think that's a show. I mean, it sounds like a great show, but why lamb burgers?
Lamb burgers, it's something I was doing even when as busy as I was, my partner and I thought it was really important to still entertain at home. And we love dinner parties,
Mhm.
but as anyone who entertains knows, it takes 2 people, like a full 2 days to prepare and clean up after a dinner party if you want to do it right.
Mhm.
And I just want to casually have people over, people who may or may not know each other, just to, hang out in our house, right? And be fed hopefully a decent meal and have a nice conversation. Do it early and early in the week, like Sunday or Monday, as opposed to the end of the week. So it was a little more informal by that note. And then do something simple. I think lamb burgers are a little fancier than hamburgers. And I put some effort into this too. I make a really nice salad. I look for a nice bottle of wine. I'll make my own dessert. I think one dish out of those 3 has to be a little wow factor, or like I cared enough to spend some time on this meal for you because I want you to feel comfortable and I want you to be well fed. And during this, it's not just having people over for dinner. It's, we're really in dark times right now. And I think, you might think this is hyperbole. Um, but I live in Washington, right? So I see the daily effects of what is going on. And I don't want to get political here because I'm sure people from all sides feel besieged right now, in some respect, right? Or disrespected by other people. And so I'm taking what I learned in restaurants, which was getting a group of people together for a meal, to think deeper thoughts, to have some fun, to I don't want to get all Oprah on you, but just to find joy in our lives. And I think we have more power within us to affect change than we think we do. And sometimes it starts small, and I think it starts with a single meal.
Mhm. That's amazing. What's the secret to a good lamb burger?
The secret to my lamb burgers are I've been working on this for a while too. I buy really good lamb, ground lamb, lots of fresh mint, a little bit of cumin.
Mhm.
I have used ginger in there. I didn't this last time. I think you've got to toast the bun. What else do I put in there? A lot of chopped garlic. It takes away any gaminess that there might be. And last night, actually, 2 guests told me after they demolished their burgers and salads and such that they didn't really like lamb, but they like my lamb burgers. So it reminds me as a host, I need to ask people next time, is there anything you don't eat? Right?
That's great. I love that. But I feel like working with like any kind of ground meat, if you overwork it, what's the key to not overworking it so it's not so dense?
Yeah, you don't want to do that because that does make for a tougher burger. I think you don't want to squish it down on the grill either, and press out all the juices. I think there should be a nice crust on there. I think the bun should be
Uh,
toasted. I always like to, you want to season it properly, salt and pepper with a liberal touch, I think. What else? What else?
Lettuce,
Um,
tomato, and
yeah,
mayo.
lettuce, tomato, and a really good bun. I went looking for good buns too, and but all the components are what's to stop a party from happening when you have like 3 courses and a bottle of wine and good conversation.
Absolutely, good conversation. So let's go to this notion of I do a newsletter for. We live in Palm Springs. My husband and I live in
Mhm.
Palm Springs now, and we do a social kind of a lifestyle newsletter. And I really love doing it. It's one of my favorite things I do all month. And so it's interesting to. And would you kind of take this kind of notion of what you're doing with the lamb burger dinners?
Yes. In fact, that's gonna be my first column probably. I wanna test this and, all my stuff is gonna be tested and retested until it's perfect, and then I'll be writing about it. But I think my first column will be, the fact that, I want it to be a small essay followed by a simple recipe, a simple, doable, but interesting recipe. And then I wanna travel I wanna include all my passions in there too. Like, there will be a travel component. I think I will continue to take out newsmakers and people from the Hill and anyone interesting comes my way. I'd like to take them out for a meal and then follow that with like bullet points from our conversation, like interesting takeaways. I'm not gonna write about the meals so much. I'm gonna tell people where we ate and what we ate, but I think the bullet points will be kind of fun. What people are thinking about, what people are reading, what people are listening to, how people think about X, Y, or Z. I'm looking forward to that too.
So when you were doing reviews, was it? I was always curious about this. Do you go in one meal and but you order lots of different things, or do you go to the restaurant multiple times, or how does that typically work?
Well, the great thing about the Washington Post, I think the Post took food and restaurants as seriously as they do government politics. So I was able to go 3 or 4 times to a restaurant with groups of people before I sat down to write about a place, right? And it's only fair when you think about it. A restaurant on a Monday night is a very different animal than a restaurant on a Saturday night, and that dinner is different from brunch or lunch, right? And by going multiple times, it allowed me to eat pretty much the cross section of a menu. So that by the time I sat down and write, I could tell you about, different waiters or different dishes. You could check for consistency. You go out with different people too, right? And I think who you're with can contribute to the way a restaurant unfolds as well. And I always try to bring out people who weren't food people. I mean, actually, the last people I wanted to eat out with were food people. You don't want to get into this situation like where is that nutmeg or mace? Like, this is my job. I'll take care of that. I mean, not that I discounted other people's opinions, but like my name was on the review, but I brought people primarily to help me eat the range of a menu, but also to maybe bring something different to the conversation too. So I'd love going out with architects, for instance, right? Because they would notice something about the lighting or the interior or how good or bad the chairs were, or some such, right? So you'd bring in people or I would bring a starving artist to a big deal restaurant to 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 get the sense of a wow factor or not from somebody who would otherwise never be able to afford this place, right? And I think it made the writing better. It made the review more credible by going out with different people. And I had a hardcore group of maybe 70 or 80 people that I ate out with on a regular
Wow.
basis, just because they knew the drill and they knew to pass plates. And they knew not to say my name, because it takes a little coaching for people to. I'll never forget a couple people I went out with, and they were fast eaters, and they just devoured everything on their plate within, like, nanoseconds. I'm like, "Oh, wait, I needed to try those," right? There are all sorts of goofy, like, odd things that go on, with this job if you aspire to do it right, I think.
So I feel like it's kind of a hard time for restaurants right now. Kind of
Mm.
people are being a little more conservative on spending, and then food prices are expensive and rent is expensive. What's your kind of take on the restaurant business?
Sure. Well, I think Americans, first of all, I think Americans have been super lucky because we've been food has been sort of a cheap commodity for a long time, right? And now the reality has hit the fan, and layered onto the fact that restaurants' bottom lines, I mean, you don't make a lot in the restaurant business unless you're a big chain that, moves a lot of people in and out. But I think um I think with that, especially right now with the ICE raids, people are afraid to go to work. So you don't have this labor pool to tap from anymore, right? And that means that their hours will be decreased. That means for the diners, the hours might be decreased, depending upon, which day you want to go to dinner and everything. It's really a tough time. And I've seen tough times in restaurants. I mean, I remember, certainly the recessions that we've had. I remember after 9/11, especially in Washington, D.C. I remember COVID, the pandemic, and what that did. But after all those events, restaurants have always sprung into action to feed us, right? And I'm amazed at the way they have been able to pivot over and over and over again. And I think there a lot of people I talk to are just exhausted right now. Old people, young people, it doesn't matter. They're just exhausted because what happened during the pandemic is still lingering. We still do have perhaps a smaller labor pool to tap from, for starters. And now you layer on these ICE raids and immigration situations, and it's just really, really hard. And for restaurants, they have to pay more because people, I mean, for dishwashers, I've talked to restaurateurs who are paying dishwashers like $20 an hour right now, right? And some bigger restaurants that can afford to do that. Um, and that's a lot.
That's a lot. I was when as I was doing my research, I found one of your articles from 2017 where you actually took a dishwasher chef and you brought up dishwashers in, and they're kind of the unsung heroes of the restaurant, and also kind of a starting position. So, what made you
Sure.
decide to? Well, tell us about that article and what made you decide to do that.
Sure. I was just thinking about, the chef or the owner, get all this credit all the time, but think about it. If if you don't have clean dishes, you can't open, right? And and I was thinking about all the people, like maybe I should do a story on, go undercover as a server in 3 different restaurants, like a big deal place, a chain restaurant, and maybe work a banquet situation. I've done that before at other newspapers, and that was great fun to see what goes on. But I was thinking about it. I thought, with immigration and everything, why not concentrate on the true unsung heroes? I used to think it was the sous chef because the sous chef had to do everything the executive chef knew how to do, but in anonymity for the most part, right? And with dishwashers, it is dangerous. It's hot. When I was doing my shift, this was at the Post flew me down to Houston because I wasn't going to be an undercover dishwasher in Washington D.C. Right, so I went down to Houston, worked in a 400-seat like an upscale Mexican restaurant. And these 2 guys from Guatemala were just spent the night with me. I had an interpreter by my side, and it was great. We all wore hefty trash bags because you're splattered the whole evening. People are throwing things your way, knives, hot oyster plates. It was crazy. And you have all this stuff all over you, right? And then your shoes get wet and like machines back up. It was a real lesson in hard work, but also I saw it as a gateway to get ahead in this country too, because these guys, among many other dishwashers that I talked to, they would look over from their position in what they called the pit, the wet pit, and they would look over, oh, the salad guy needs some help, or the pastry chef needs some help. And they would then volunteer to help them cut, prep, frost something, whatever it was. And they knew where everything was in the restaurant and and mastered a lot of the jobs that other people did, so that in the event that someone fell sick or was out for whatever reason, they could step in. And then you master that job, and then you go up and up and up, right? And I thought it was, as far as jobs go, that was one that a lot of immigrants chose because, it's this gateway
Mhm.
job to
What
something
was the
better.
reception to a story like that? Because it's kind of out of your usually what you typically do. What was your reader reception from that?
Well, over the years, I've really tried to do things that might surprise people every once in a while. I think when you're just writing restaurant reviews, people expect that, but you need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and write about other things. And that was something that I've been thinking about, looking at peeling the curtain back behind restaurant workers. Who do I identify? I landed on dishwashers, and people loved it. And I think a lot of people didn't think that a lot of the famous chefs that we know today started out as dishwashers, and they have great respect for the men and women in the pit, as a result. And some of them even, give them respectful titles like porter in their
Uh-huh.
restaurants, which is a little more glamorous than, and also a little more honest too, because you're not just a dishwasher. The good ones learn how to do many things in a restaurant, right?
Mhm. So it's kinda like the mailroom of the kitchen.
Yes. Oh, that's a good that's a good way of describing it. Yes, and I like a lot of us have worked in mailrooms. I did at the Washington Post when I first started, so, you know.
What does it take to be a successful restaurant? Because I know restaurants, some last for years and some last a couple of years and they're over and they move on and reinvent. So what do you think is the key?
Well, good food really helps. I think, someone who's good with numbers really helps, and the problem is you can be a really good cook, but a really bad numbers person,
Uh-huh.
right? So you've gotta have someone in your posse who can help you navigate that. Because really, chefs tell me they have to be everything. They have to be a plumber, electrician, a
Uh-huh.
health crisis manager, a teacher, a principal, all these things, in addition to, oh, by the way, putting out good food, right? So I think I know too much. I would never do it because I know way too much and how hard it is. I
It's
mean,
hard.
you think about it. People in the restaurant industry are always working when everyone else is having fun.
Uh-huh.
Saturday brunch, New Year's Eve, Mother's Day, whatever, right? The hours are not conducive to, I mean, they can be, but it's just, it's hard work.
It is hard work. We owned a bar for a couple of years that served food. We did not call it a restaurant. It was a bar that served food, and it was
Hmm.
hard. It was really hard, and I
Sure.
don't know how I have a whole new respect for people in that food and beverage business because it's it is yeah, but it has to be more than a passion too if you're going to make it work. You have to be that business person too, and you have to
Yeah.
figure out how to keep it all going.
Broad skill set for sure.
How often are you eating out now?
Right now, well, a lot of people are inviting me over for dinner or inviting me out to eat, and I promised, you know, I already had dinner invitations sort of lined up, so it's not like I'm cooking a lot at home right now, and I sort of have to build up the staples that allow me to do that in a more efficient way, I think. Because for years my refrigerator was sort of a very expensive wine cooler in some respects.
Well, you and your partner had also downsized from a house to an apartment, and now
We did.
you're not eating out as much. So, how has your life changed in your life after news?
Yeah, well, I think I'm just, this all my last day was last Wednesday, so I'm just beginning
Oh,
to
wow.
feel all this and all this change. I've been invited to do some cool things. You never know, as I said earlier, you never know what comes down the pike when you open yourselves self up to opportunities, right? So, I joked in my last online chat that, hey, giving speeches on an ocean liner wouldn't be a bad gig, would it? And I've had a couple of them reach out to me, which is, and who knows where that goes. But I find it really interesting. I find, people, I have had a book in me at some point too. And people have asked if I have an agent or if I've ever wanted to do TV or something like that. So whole new chapters are opening up. And I think I want to just step back for a little bit and enjoy that moment. And I've been responding to lots of readers and other people. But I think you need to give yourself just a little window of break and reflection because I'm doing two things. You're not supposed to make these big life changes, bam, bam, bam. And we moved and I put out a big fall dining guide and then I left the post, so I'm changing a lot right now, and I'm just trying to um, enjoy it and think about what I wanna do next, but I have made plans. I think you can't just, I mean, I'm not the type of person to just sit back and let things happen to me. I think you have to go out there, you have to follow up on any offers, you have to follow up with people, you have to show up. Showing up is half of it, right? And show interest in anything new. I have no idea where I'm gonna be next year. I do know I wanna travel more. That is a huge that's where I've always spent a lot of my money, even when I was a student at Georgetown, and, live in other places for longer periods of time than this last job has allowed me to do.
I think that you really should take some time. I know you seem like you're very aggressive, like you're really going to figure out what you're doing next. But I really do think you should take at least a few months to just relax and reflect on what because you really probably haven't even thought about everything that you have done and everything that you could do and what's next. So just my advice would be to take some time to just kind of lay back and enjoy it and see what happens next and then kind of weigh your options. Maybe like you say in the new year is always a good time. What kind of book are you thinking of though?
Well, this is funny. I'm a gay guy with no children, but lots of nieces and nephews that I love. It's a children's book with one recipe in it. And I've outlined what it's gonna be, and I don't wanna reveal too much because I think you have to act on those things when you start but it is a children's book with one recipe, and, um, and I'm really excited about it.
That's cool. That's very exciting. Kinda like the Guncle, our friend who lives here in Palm Springs wrote the Guncle. Have you heard has this read
Oh, I
that?
like that. Yeah, yeah.
So you spent your entire career as a food critic for, 25 plus years.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to someone who's would like to have that career, or does that career even still exist today?
Well, there are lots of influencers and everything right now, but I think I would start small. You got to write. You got to have the clips, to show to people that you can do this. Everyone says they're interested in food, but to it's writing is a hard thing, and you've got to. I think for a lot of people, you got to start somewhere. Just start with a newsletter, start with a blog, start with something you're passionate about, and then show that work to people who have a writing sensibility, right? So they can correct you or edit you or whatever. I get lots of calls. I've gotten lots of calls from young kids or people who are starting out. Like, would you look at this? Whether it's my video or my story or whatever, right? I think travel as much as you can afford to, because that gives you a sense of what food tastes like in different parts of the world. Like, you know, this is French onion soup in France, and this is, African peanut stew in West Africa, right? Whatever you can do. I also think it helps to become an expert in your field. Like if you love coffee or barbecue or pizza, become the go-to guy or gal for those subjects, right? And when people have questions about those things, you can develop an expertise. You will be the go-to person they go to when they're doing stories on those things.
But the other thing I thought was so cute was the article and video you did with your mother making her buttermilk chocolate cake.
Mm. Yeah, my mom is a real trooper, and I think I she's one of these she's 98 now. She lives by herself.
Wow.
She got back from Africa about 6 months ago. My brother's with the State Department in Nairobi, and she traveled by herself.
Wow.
She's 98 though, right? So I want to spend a little bit more time seeing her. And the reason I did that story, I think was it ran around Mother's Day, but over the years she's made cameo appearances in columns and everything. It's just kind of fun to have that like recurring character every once in a while, right? We talk about, every night, like what she ate, what I ate in the restaurant. We compare notes and everything. And she always asked me, do you ever get tired of eating out? I said, no, not at all. You always get hungry again, yada, yada. But the reason we cooked together in the first place was because she was getting older and I wanted to be able to do those things that I loved as a kid that she made for us, right? She was a really good home cook, but she was also a home cook in Minnesota in the 60s and 70s, right? And so, yes, we did have Jello sometimes for dinner, but she made a lot of things from scratch, right? So I cooked maybe 3 or 4 dishes with her, like her recipe for goulash and a couple cakes and some other things, her Rice Krispie potatoes, just so that I got the measurements down and saw
Right.
how she did it because people can leave recipes behind but they often omit something or their abbreviations or butter the size of a walnut. That's my grandmother's era, right? But sometimes they write in a shorthand that you might not know, right? And when she's gone, I want to be able to replicate those childhood flavors on my own.
That's really smart because I feel like I've done this with my mother a couple of times, and she doesn't even really measure anything. She just kind of eyeballs it and kind of figures
Right.
out, because she's been doing, like your mother said that the frosting recipe was from a Betty Crocker cookbook from 1951. She's been making that for 70 plus years.
You in their sleep, yeah, for sure.
It is pretty remarkable, though, isn't it? All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this, and I can't wait to see what's next for your life after news.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you, Jason.
Nice to meet you, Tom. Okay, you can follow Tom on his website, tomsietsema.com. Put the link in the show notes. Also, I asked him for the recipe for his lamb burgers, and he says he hasn't quite perfected it yet, but promises to share it as soon as he does. I'll keep on him for that. On the next episode of Life After News, if you've ever watched a police pursuit in Los Angeles, you've probably heard Larry Welk reporting from the helicopter. He is amazing at it. He's transitioned out of that, and we'll tell you what he's doing now. We're fast approaching our goals on YouTube. Thank you so much for the support. If you haven't subscribed, please do at Life After News and watch something over there. Thank you.